This is not just cold, this is a killer.
If this isn't climate change, then what is it?
As an American, I'm here to say we need to act.
All dramatic weather is our fault.
Oh my God!
Terrible tornadoes in Oklahoma. Horrible.
We know that this is because of the burning of fossil fuels.
Carbon could cost us the planet.
Makes me want to ask Al Gore about that, but where is he?
Is Al at one of his other houses?
Whether Gore's right about global warming didn't matter. You already pay for his remedy.
They're declaring war truly on jobs.
Who will win this war?
Is there a happy ending?
We'll search for that. That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
I titled this program Chill Out because after I researched the global warming scare, that was my conclusion. We ought to just chill out. But our government isn't chilling out. You now pay billions to try to fix global warming. And this year, The Hill, the Washington newspaper that covers Congress, said climate will be the political battle of 2014. Big money's being spent to convince Americans to vote to spend even more to try to stop global warming. In a moment, we'll hear from Bill Nye, the science guy, who says he's frantic about climate change. He'll debate Mark Morano of ClimateDepot.com. But first, let me set the terms of debate. People say to me, Stossel, you don't believe in global warming? But I do. I think it's a stupid question, because what do you mean when you say global warming? To me, it's really four questions. One, is the globe warming? Well, yes, global temperatures have risen, though not lately so much. Question two, is the warming man-made? Is it our fault? Three, is it a crisis? And four, if it is, can we do anything about it? Bill Nye's answers to those questions are yes, 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 and yes. And for years, he's told his viewers, beware of
What we call global warming. Global warming. The globe is getting too warm, and something we've got to be careful of. Otherwise, things could get weird.
Bill Nye joins us now, along with climate change skeptic Mark Morano. Mark, you first. Why aren't you scared? Bill and lots of people are.
We're now able to empirically look at their predictions that they made in the 80s and start to see them fail. And out of 117 climate models, one analysis showed 114 failed. So when the predictions are failing them, they'll still claim it's worse than they thought. But that's not the case here. So the bottom line is the burden of proof is on them, and they've failed to make the case.
Bill Nye?
In the year 1750, there were about 1 billion humans in the world. Now, there are well over 7 billion people in the world. It more than doubled in my lifetime. So all these people trying to live the way we live in the developed world is filling the atmosphere with a great deal more carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases than existed a couple centuries ago. It's the speed at which it is changing that is going to be troublesome for so many large populations of humans around the world. Now, you may have heard of the hockey stick graph. This is where we compare the temperature of the world over the last 10,000 years with the temperature now. And so we think of that as
oh
the
my God, it's
shaft
going
of
to
a
shoot
hockey
up.
stick. Well, it is shooting up. It's not going to. It is shooting up. And so it's the speed that we're going to have difficulty dealing with.
But temperature hasn't increased in the
say,
past 15 years. It isn't shooting up.
When you cherry pick the data for certain surface temperatures, you end up with a very small change, so hardly noticeable. These people try to introduce the idea that scientific uncertainty, plus or minus a few percent, is equivalent to doubt about the whole thing. This is perfectly analogous to the cigarette industry and cancer. Trying to introduce the idea that since you can't prove any one thing, the whole thing is in doubt.
As a consumer reporter, just hang on one second, Mark, I'll give you a shot. As a consumer reporter, I've covered 1,000 scares: lawn chemicals, cell phone radiation, pesticide residues, plastic bottles killing people, power lines, mad cow disease was going to kill everybody. And always the example is, yeah, there were doubters about cigarettes. I mean, that one example doesn't mean that the global warming scare is correct. But Mark, I should let you speak.
Yeah, for him to bring up cigarettes, I mean, these are the global warming scientists are the ones fulfilling a narrative. I mean, we have Michael Oppenheimer, one of the lead UN scientists, took an endowment from Barbara Streisand. He's the climatologist to the stars. He's
they got to get money from this. Barbara Streisand wants to give me money. I'll take it.
Right, but it's so insulting to imply that somehow skeptical scientists are on the pay like tobacco companies. It's the height of arrogance when you look at the actual data. The global warming scientists, through government grants, foundations, through media empowerment, have the full advantages of government money, foundation money, university money. There's not even any comparison. And yet, these skeptical scientists, as their numbers have grown, we've had scientists like James Lovelock, who's the inventor of the Gaia Earth theory, who's reversed himself.
But a lot of climate scientists, serious ones, are genuinely worried.
The ones you'll always point to with these genuine climate scientists are from the United Nations. And the United Nations, the head of it, Rajendra Pachauri, has just came out last year or the year before and said their mission is to make the case that CO2 is driving global warming. They put the cart before the horse. And what happened was many UN scientists have now turned on it. Leonard Begstedt, a Swedish scientist, has just come out and said we wouldn't even have noticed the warming of the 20th century if it weren't for modern instrumentation. And the idea of the hockey stick that Bill Nye mentioned is absurd. That has been called, quote, statistical rubbish, unquote. And hundreds of scientists in dozens and dozens of studies have shown both the medieval and the Roman warming period, and these have appeared in peer-reviewed journals, were as warm or warmer than current temperatures.
Bill?
See if we can agree about this. There used to be 1 billion people a couple centuries ago. Now there are 7 billion.
We agree on that. And the air is cleaner and people are living better and fewer people are starving because of capitalism and industrialization.
Do we agree that the atmosphere used to have 250 parts per million, now it has over 400?
There's more greenhouse gas out
We've had ice ages at between 2,000 and 8,000 parts per million in the geologic history of the Earth. We've had similar temperatures with 20 times the CO2 levels.
Climate does change. And if you look over time, we have a graph here from just the year 1000 to today. We had the medieval warm period. We had the little ice age. Big changes.
You've really messed with the far right-hand side of that graph.
That's the United Nations graph from 1990, pre-hockey stick, before they reinvented past temperatures.
Do you agree that it's never happened this fast?
Actually, we've had, without benefit of mankind, similar CO2 levels in the recent past without mankind's influence. And I think the speed has nothing to do with it. It comes down to hundreds of factors are influencing our climate here. CO2 is not the tail that wags the dog. Another scientist who's essentially reversed herself is Judith Curry from Georgia Institute of Technology. She now says openly that you cannot control weather by reducing emissions. And that seems to be the entire premise of the United Nations, that somehow if we tweak emissions through carbon taxes, cap and trade, we can alter weather patterns. You opened up with tornadoes and Barbara Boxer. She actually went down to the Senate floor the day of tornadoes and implied a carbon tax would help prevent future tornado outbreaks. This is medieval witchcraft.
Seems like every time there's a new weather extreme, some people say the cause was man-made global warming.
Tomorrow morning, 90% of the country will face below normal temperatures.
If this isn't climate change, then what is it? We know that this is because of the burning of fossil fuels.
In 1 year, we have had the largest tornado ever recorded on Earth. And we have had the fastest hurricane ever recorded on Earth. And they've hit within 6 months of each other.
Terrible tornadoes in Oklahoma. Horrible. Carbon could cost us the planet.
That was Senator Barbara Boxer the very day of the Oklahoma tornado. So, Bill, global warming is going to cost us the planet? Causing these tornadoes?
The planet will be here. Well, the planet will be here. But if we have to continually rebuild and displace people.
The idea that the United States or a developing world should limit their energy choices based on rising CO2 fares is scientifically baseless. And as I mentioned, and the geologic record bears that out, and the current weather bears it out. There's no more weather extremes. You know, over the 20th century, you can go from hurricanes, we're at a historic low right now.
The Oklahoma tornado was the biggest ever.
And they have better monitoring. We had the lowest year on record for tornadoes, and since the 1950s. There were fewer tornadoes.
I'm struck researching this, how there's constant media hysteria, and it changes. In 1941, it was reported that World War II caused weather extremes. In 1961, the New York Times said scientists agree the world's becoming colder. Scientists worried about a new ice age. Now we worry about warming. Shouldn't we be skeptical?
Yes, and I'm sure people would say, well, science has advanced so much more. Well, science is always going to advance. The point is, this is the narrative of our day. And Bill keeps going on about overpopulation. The problem is that people now recognize one of the biggest problems is underpopulation. As the developing world gets more and more carbon-based energy, India and Africa, and starts developing, the population is going to level off. So the hysteria has been there.
So we disagree about the facts, Mr. Moreno.
So you can't disagree about facts.
The problem is not just that there are more people in India and China. It's they are using more energy than they ever used to use.
And God
they want to live the way we live in the.
Why is that a problem?
They want to live the way we
thing.
live in the developed world.
Would you deny them that? I interviewed Jerry Brown, who said that they couldn't emulate American lifestyle. Well, who is he? How is the white, wealthy Western world in Europe and the United States going to tell people of color, 1.3 billion in the developing world, they can't have what we have? Who is Bill Nye to tell them they can't have carbon-based energy, which we took full advantage of?
Answer that.
We don't want to have less. We want to do more with less. And this is where the innovations come in.
Sure.
This is where the emerging technologies come in. But embracing technologies that produce extra carbon dioxide, extra greenhouse gases, at this point in human history is not in our best interest.
I just want to play one more video example to end. This idea that politicians can fix the climate strikes me as arrogance, and I think we heard arrogance 6 years ago from our president after he defeated Hillary Clinton.
This was the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal.
Bill, isn't this the conceit of the self-anointed? Politicians are going to fix the climate?
By way of example, is it conceit when politicians claim they're going to fix potholes in a street?
No, they can do that.
Is it conceit when politicians say they're going to time the traffic lights?
No, they can do that.
Is it conceit when politicians... Is it conceit when politicians say they're going to clean up the water in Chesapeake Bay?
Nope.
Is that inappropriate? Those things have been done.
Right.
So
Those
this is
are doable.
the same thing on a much, much larger scale.
Thank you, Bill Nye and Mark Morano.
Thank
to
you.
Keep this conversation going on Facebook or Twitter. If you use that hashtag #ChillOut, you can let me and others know what you think. Coming up, the search for Al Gore. Will we find him? Also, how politicians pretend to stop global warming by promising people free stuff. That's how I got this free golf cart. Totally free. Well, free for me. You taxpayers paid for it.
We invested in new American technologies to reverse our dependence on foreign oil and double our wind and solar power. And today, we generate more renewable energy than ever.
Yes, we do. But so what? It's still a tiny amount. Windmills and solar power combined now amount to less than 4% of the energy we use. And both are expensive. They only exist because they get billions in subsidies from you. I think these subsidies are a scam, but the president says we have to do this to stop global warming, and most environmental groups agree. Robert Engelman is the president of World Watch Institute. So, Robert, you say we need these subsidies.
I think there might be better ways of accomplishing what President Obama is trying to do, but given the rough and tumble of politics and that we can't do the most direct thing, which would be to tax carbon, I'm not sure why to take off on green subsidies when there's so many other subsidies in the government. I'd like to see fewer of them, generally speaking, but I don't see any particular reason to strip them off renewable energy when they exist so many other places, as, for example, in fossil fuels, nuclear energy, and elsewhere.
Well, as a libertarian, I agree. I say get rid of all subsidies. But I think the green subsidies get noticed because they are so much bigger.
They aren't that big.
I have a list here. If you look at natural gas, oil, and coal, less than a penny per megawatt hour. But wind is 100 times what oil gets. And solar is 1,000 times more.
That makes all the sense in the world. What is immature about fossil fuels? What subsidies are typically used to do is to help technologies that are startup and aren't likely to make it, because any new technology is likely to need help to actually become profitable, to gain a major volume. The real question you ought to be asking, John, is why are there subsidies for coal, natural gas, and the fossil fuels.
I don't know, and I agree. Let's get rid of all of them. But
Okay,
for the new areas, it's been 20 years at least now. When is it no longer baby steps for them? 100 years?
As long as we don't tax carbon, they're probably going to need some help because carbon-based fuels have lots of advantages. I hope it's not necessary for 100 years. I hope it's not necessary for 10, but it's certainly a good thing right now compared to the alternative that's available politically.
And what about the wasted money on these subsidies? Solyndra got a lot of publicity. That was $500 million. Abound Solar went bankrupt too, $400 million. I got a free golf cart because of an idiot electric car subsidy where there was so much of a tax credit that the cart was free.
Yeah, I mean, these are illustrative of absolutely nothing in particular. It was a one-year program basically because there was all this money going into stimulus and the government was looking for win-win situations, and somebody had the idea, and I don't think it's a terrible one, let's encourage golf carts and see if they can become a larger mode of transportation,
well,
not
let's
on golf
encourage
courses,
electric
but everywhere.
vehicles. But is electric power so clean?
Well, not now at the moment, overwhelmingly, although it's become cleaner partly as a result of its greater use of natural gas. And let me point out the federal government heavily subsidized the early development of hydraulic fracturing or fracking technology. That's another example where the government invested in a new technology. And you and I are getting the benefits of that right now by having very cheap gas.
Government may have invested in the fracking technology in the 60s and 70s. But it wasn't until 30 years later that industry on its own, often in spite of government, created the wonderful natural gas boom that's lowered our greenhouse gas emissions.
Well, see, I don't think it's been on their own. I think it's been in part because of these early investments, and I'm not sure exactly when they ended, I'll be honest with you. So
Europe's ahead of America on this stuff, right?
Parts of Europe, a lot of Europe is in the way they encourage renewable energy. Germany,
England,
for example.
Germany. But Germany
especially
is now cutting back, reducing alternative energy subsidies. Merkel says we need to tame the cost explosion. This will be the central project of her next government. They tried it. They found it hurt poor people.
I don't think it's the central project, and I'm not sure it's just that they found that it hurts poor people. But be that as it may, yes, there is definitely this trade-off of costs, which is a real issue and has to be faced. So it's higher economically to justify a lot of these costs. That has political ramifications. That's not surprising. There's no question that from the standpoint of long-term fuel availability, you want to have renewable energy.
Fine. It's wonderful. It's clean. And when the market makes it work, we'll have it. But we have to wait till the technology happens. The free market will make that happen. Government force makes it worse.
I don't think the free market necessarily does make it happen. We've had tremendous improvements in pollution control, but they weren't because industry on its own or the free market on its own said, wow, wouldn't it be good if we spent a lot of money on scrubbers, on smokestacks? That needed effectively a partnership with government.
True.
These two
That's
things
for
work
pollution
together.
control. But is carbon dioxide pollution?
Well, if you think about its impacts on our long-term health and survivability, it sure as heck is.
Thank you, Robert Engelman. We disagree about that. Up next, look at this gross stuff. It's coal. It's filthy. Pollutes the air. But our next guests love this stuff. They'll tell us why. What's powering your TV set? Where does the electricity come from? Wind? Solar power? Not likely. America gets nearly all its electricity from natural gas, nuclear power, and this stuff, coal. 86% of our power comes from those three sources of energy, and this provides the most. Though probably not for long, because now our government's passed new rules that make it nearly impossible to burn coal. Senator Barack Obama made it very clear that's what he would do if he were elected president.
If somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
And that's basically what's happened now. EPA rules make opening a new plant nearly impossible and may eventually shut down existing plants. And maybe that's a good thing. Burning this stuff does produce more than a third of America's greenhouse gases. Natural gas, as the previous guest said, emits much less, and nuclear power gives off no CO2. So since coal is so dirty, why not discourage its use? Bill Bissett of the Kentucky Coal Association says that's a terrible idea. Why, Bill?
It is a terrible idea, John, because we have the coal in the ground here in the United States. It's plentiful. We have the best reserves in the world, yet we have a president in Washington who's making us go overseas to sell it. And by the way, to your previous guest, I can tell you right now, Europe, like you said, is moving absolutely towards coal because it's a great emerging market for us.
But it's going to bake the earth with greenhouse gases, global warming.
We hear that a lot, and even if you put the climate change, let's say, discussion aside, you've got to look at the fact that so many other countries, again, Germany, like you said, are moving towards coal, and they're doing so rapidly. So that's going to create so much more carbon that whatever we do here in the United States is going to be quickly nullified by what's going on overseas. And I don't think the president is calculating that, in his decisions right now.
Well, even if global warming is hysteria, this stuff pollutes the air more than natural gas, more than wind power, certainly, and solar power. So if we discourage it, seems like it's a nice thing to do for people.
What's important to realize is we do have clean air right now. We're burning more and more coal. We're using more and more electricity. We're creating more and more electricity at a time when the air is the cleanest it's ever been, since the industrialized time. And what's frustrating, though, is I think we get zero credit for the progress we've made.
Your industry has found amazing ways to clean the stuff before it leaves the smokestack.
What we're frustrated with, we seem to be having these laboratory-based technologies. They don't exist in the real world that the president's supporters think we should use in coal that'll have very negligible effects on the environment, but will essentially knock us out of the marketplace, which is what concerns us greatly as a nationwide industry.
Now, it's not like you have no political support. Some members of Congress, mostly from states that produce fossil fuels, have been critical of the president's regulations.
He needs to take his foot off the neck of the energy producers.
They're declaring war truly on jobs.
So they just can't win? They're the minority?
They are the minority in most cases now. Democrat Senator Manchin, I think, is a strong voice for coal. But you look at the House, so many initiatives there, but, they tend to die either, on Senator Harry Reid's desk or by the president's veto. This president, the most powerful man on the planet, is really targeted our industry. In his first term, far more about coal production. This term, he's far more targeted the usage of coal. And what we're seeing is a real loss of our market, which is putting people out of work.
It's not just the president. Sierra Club. It's an outdated, backward, and dirty 19th century technology.
Mm-hmm. And that is what those anti-coal activists say and say again, time and time again. But they offer no solutions. Your previous guest talked about the importance of renewable energy. We understand that, but for every gigawatt of renewable energy, you need a gigawatt of fossil fuel to back it up. Why? Because when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you've got to have that reliable electricity.
Thank you, Bill Bissett. Now, he's a lobbyist. Let's talk to someone in the coal business who gets his hands dirty. West Virginia coal miner Mark Nelson. What's happened where you live?
People are losing their jobs. People are losing their cars. People are losing their homes. West Virginia is taking a beating.
But maybe it's a good thing for people. There's black lung disease. A lot of harm comes from the work to people like you.
Well, the technology has came a long ways. Our industry is a lot cleaner. Our industry is way safer than it used to be. They don't show the good side of our industry. Everything is only about the bad side. They're not showing the advancements we have made.
And one of the other good things I notice where you live, electricity is much cheaper, half the price of what it is where I live. Kentucky, West Virginia versus New York, I pay twice as much.
And the coal is abundant. It's the cheapest fossil fuel we have. If we can produce it cheap, we can produce it safe. Nobody has came up with the answer to say that we can do without coal. We have this technology. We have
natural gas.
We do have natural gas. You can't give one company a monopoly either. If you do away with coal and leave it all up to gas, do you think the prices will stay down? No, they're going to go up.
Why? They'll just drill, they'll do more fracking.
How many gas wells can you drill? I mean, Are they going to be in everybody's backyard?
Well, thank you, Mark, for coming in. I hope you and your friends keep your jobs.
And we thank you for that. And coal miners, we don't want handouts. We want our jobs back. That's what we want.
Thank you, Mark. Coming up, the search for Al Gore continues.
Is Al at one of his other houses?
And I'll jump into the Hudson River to make a point.
The Arctic is experiencing faster melting. If this were to go, sea level worldwide would go up 20 feet. This is what would happen in Florida.
20 feet? Oh my goodness, we might drown. Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth, won him an Oscar and won him a Nobel Prize. And yet, much of the movie is nonsense. Sea levels may rise 20 feet is absurd. Even the IPCC says maybe 3 feet. And there are other problems with his film that I wanted to ask the former vice president about. I've got this special green phone just for him. We gave his office the phone number, but he doesn't call. And he hasn't ever, to my knowledge, fielded questions from skeptical reporters or scientists. I wish he would, because there are so many odd claims in his movie. For example, he says the world's best scientists, thousands of them, are unanimous. We must act on global warming.
The 3,000 best scientists in the world from 113 countries have issued 4 unanimous reports saying we've got to deal with it.
Have any of the IPCC reports ever been unanimous that you're aware of?
Well, that's a clip from a documentary that rebuts much of what is said in An Inconvenient Truth. It's called An Inconsistent Truth. It includes a sample of Mr. Gore's appearance before Congress.
You must have been listening to our testimony that we've had for the last few days with dozens of experts that have come in who have given completely different views.
There are people who still believe that the moon landing was staged on a movie lot in Arizona.
So we global warming skeptics are idiots who think the moon landing was staged. The film, An Inconsistent Truth, was made by radio host Phil Valentine. So where can people see your movie?
Amazon.com. It's available there for people to buy the DVD.
All right. What bothers you about the vice president is the hypocrisy.
Yes.
Meaning?
Meaning that he lives the life of a king. He has 4 or 5 houses. He flies around in private jets, and he tells us we need to lower our carbon footprint so we can save the planet.
Tennessee Center for Public Policy looked at his electric bills.
They found that he was still using 10 to 15 times the electricity of the average household, even after he greened his house. And he got some kind of certificate from the green people out there that says that he had done a wonderful job as far as greening his house.
Before he did that, he was using 20 times.
20 times, that's exactly right. So he's a hypocrite.
Phil tried to get an interview with Al Gore. He went to one of Gore's book signings, but he and his camera were blocked from getting near the vice president. Then they went to one of Al Gore's homes.
Just wondering if Al Gore could come out and do an interview with us for a few minutes. Is Al at one of his other houses, or?
He doesn't have any other houses.
He doesn't have 3 more houses?
No.
He's got one in Virginia, doesn't he?
No.
Place in San Francisco?
No.
No, yes, it's not true, right?
No, he's got several other houses. Tipper may be living in one of them. I'm not sure which one she lives in since they've split. But he has multiple houses. He has the family house in
Your
Clark.
movie has a section about that. Let's play that.
He owns a home in Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. He owns 2 properties in California, a condo overlooking San Francisco Bay, and an ocean view villa in Montecito. Then there's the house and farm in Carthage, Tennessee. Then, of course, there's his mansion in Nashville. Oh, and the humongous houseboat he keeps on a lake in Tennessee. He calls it BioSolar One.
He's a partner in a venture capital firm that backed the Fisker car company.
Yes.
They just went bankrupt.
By the way, the car's name is Karma. How appropriate.
And they cost $100,000.
Yeah, that's for the little people, John.
One final clip from your movie, largely thanks to Al Gore. Americans now say they're concerned about global warming. But do they understand what they're talking about?
Do you believe in global warming?
Yes, I do.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Do you believe in global warming?
Yes. 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 Yes.
Do you believe in global warming?
Yes, I do.
And why?
Why? Because
I ask the hardest questions, don't I?
humans,
Humans. And doing what?
everything that we do, cameras and
These?
Now, come on, you probably picked the silliest examples, but...
No, we didn't. This is what we got. This is basically what their belief in global warming is very wide, but their understanding is very shallow.
It's the cool thing to do.
That's right. It's hip, but they need to know why. That's why we encourage critical thinking. People need to know why they believe as they believe. And if there's one thing that people understand after they see this movie is there is no consensus on global warming.
Yeah, one of the myths you attack is that the 3,000 scientists, the best, as he says,
right,
at the Intergovernmental Panel, and I think it's important to remember the IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Governments like to control things. That the 3,000 concluded that man is 95% chance man's causing.
Right. Unanimous. But of course, it's not unanimous. There were 192 scientists. There weren't 3,000.
But there were thousands of scientists involved in the making of the IPCC report.
Well, there were reviewers, and we have several of the expert reviewers in the movie as well. You've got to understand that what these people do with the policy report that comes out is they cherry pick what it is they want to feed to the press, and they feed the hysteria to the press, and they leave the rest of it in the report that nobody watches.
What's in it for them?
Well, but there's money. There's money in it. I mean, people are making tons of money because if you want to get a government grant, just label it global warming, and then you're going to get the government grant. If nobody cares about it, no government's going to fund things that says the sun's actually doing this, which we found out that that's predominantly
and if you say,
the problem.
we don't know what's going on, they're not going to fund that.
Oh, no, absolutely not. No. By the way, carbon, they've shortened this, right? Carbon dioxide is harmless. It's what we exhale. As a matter of fact, it's beneficial.
They call it a pollutant.
They call it a pollutant, which is absolutely absurd. What we exhale with every breath is not a pollutant. So they've shortened it to carbon so that people won't, like the lump of coal that you have, people will think that it's something awful and sinister and dirty. And so he's now conjoined smog with carbon dioxide. There is no carbon dioxide in smog.
It's what plants breathe in.
Absolutely. It's what they need for food. It's this symbiotic relationship that we have with plants, and it's a good thing for the planet.
Thank you, Phil Valentine. And Mr. Gore, if you're watching, please give us a call. Coming up, the moral case for fossil fuels.
It's a happy ending.
Those protesters are upset about fracking for natural gas, but natural gas is relatively clean. Its increased use has lowered America's greenhouse gas emissions. Good. But some people still hate it and hate all fossil fuels. It's immoral, they say, to make money putting carbon in the air. But Alex Epstein of the Center for Industrial Progress says the opposite's true. What do you mean?
Well, I think not only is natural gas amazing, and not only do I admire the natural gas industry, but I admire the oil industry and the coal industry, because this is the only industry in the world that creates cheap, plentiful, reliable energy on a global scale. So these are the guys allowing us to be comfortable in a studio when it's freezing outside. They make it possible for us to have clean water, to do what we want with life, to have time to do scientific research. It's amazing, and that's why I have a pin here that says, I love fossil fuels.
You also sometimes wear this T-shirt on college campuses.
This
I love fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And do people then come up and say, what's wrong with you?
Part of the reason I got into this is because I supposedly went to all the best schools as a kid and in college, and I never learned about the value of energy. And if you appreciate the value of energy, then you really have to appreciate the value of fossil fuels. So I want people to be attracted to the issue.
Poor people around the world have better lives because of these fuels that Americans now hate.
Yeah, and it's noteworthy that in particular they have better environments, because we hear, fossil fuels are destroying the planet. Well, actually, we live on the cleanest, safest planet in history. We hear that, we've destroyed the climate. We'll probably see more about that. We'll probably talk more about that. We're actually 50 times safer from the climate than we were 80 years ago because we have the technology that's powered by fossil fuels.
And the wealth, so we burn more energy than anybody else, and our air is cleaner.
Right. We always have to look at what's the big picture, what's the alternative.
Solar.
Well, there's such a thing as an imaginary alternative, but if we look at the alternatives that have existed in reality, we used to burn wood and have indoor air pollution. We used to burn coal inside. Now we have decentralized power plants. We have all these amazing things. And it's nothing against wind and solar if those were actually decently performing industries. We just want the best energy, and right now that's overwhelmingly fossil fuels.
And burning wood is terrible. A terrible pollutant.
Yeah, I mean, it's inefficient. And one thing with these so-called renewable initiatives in Europe, the leading new source of energy there because of these mandates is wood. So, I mean, this is just going back to barbarism.
A few years ago, when Europe was caught in a frenzy over carbon emissions, the British government paid for this commercial.
There was once a land where the weather was very, very strange. There were awful heat waves in some parts, and in others, terrible storms and floods. Some places could even disappear under the sea. And it was the children of the land who'd have to live with the horrible consequences. The grown-ups realized they had to do something.
Is there a happy ending?
The ad then leads you to a government website that tells you how you can reduce your carbon footprint. So, what's wrong with that?
Well, two things. First of all, that we're talking about it as noble to use less energy, that's like saying it's noble to have less money. No, you might misuse energy, you might be inefficient, but more is always better because energy is the capacity to be productive. So that's a positive thing. So it should never be an ideal. Now, if they say, well, the fossil fuel industry, they're making our climate more dangerous, that's the other fallacy here because the story is the exact opposite of this little propaganda fairy tale. The fossil fuel industry is not taking a safe climate and making it dangerous. They're taking a dangerous climate and making it safe. And anyone who contradicts me should go outside right now and try to live naturally in harmony with nature.
How old are you?
I am 33.
Okay. Well, you've come a long way. Thank you, Alex. Coming up, my personal battles with pollution and global warming.
Even here, within sight of the Empire State Building, within a short distance of millions of people flushing, I'm willing to do this. Oh, I'm such a good citizen riding my bike to work. I'm gonna save the Earth.
What a dope that guy is. The Earth will not notice if he rides his bike to work. And yet, somehow, even though I know better, I get a kind of smug satisfaction riding my bike. It feels green. It's tough to resist the global warming propaganda. It's hard to see the bigger picture. And this small-mindedness affects people on both sides of the debate. I laughed a few weeks ago when I heard that global warming activists were trapped in ice.
A passenger ship with 74 people on board has been trapped in ice in Antarctica.
That's the icebreaker coming to rescue us, Alec.
Brilliant!
The original Chinese rescue vessel is now stuck in the ice.
I love the irony, but the fact that there was more ice in that one part of Antarctica doesn't prove that global warming alarmism is foolish, and the recent cold snap doesn't prove anything either, although some suggested it did.
Apparently, decades of peer-reviewed scientific study can be, like a ficus plant, destroyed in one cold weekend.
Jon Stewart got that one right. But what he and the rest of the big government left don't get is that there are no good peer-reviewed studies showing man's greenhouse gases create a crisis. There are computer models that suggest big problems, but the models aren't very good. Many already have turned out to be wrong. And even if the models were accurate, what the zealots want us to do, ride a bike to work, buy a Prius, pay more for these light bulbs, pay much more for cars and electricity, won't make any difference. The Earth won't care. Even if all of us did those things, the Earth won't notice. America's a small part of the world. China builds a new coal plant every week. It'll be years before we really know whether global warming's a threat. Possibly by then, if we haven't crushed our economy with stupid regulations, we'll invent good enough technology to do something about it. But we don't have it now, and the things we are doing are pointless. This is a government-funded ad.
Reduce carbon pollution. Change a bulb. Act on climate change.
These will not make any measurable difference. Environmental activists say if we don't love their endless regulations and these light bulbs, we don't care about the Earth. I say, chill out. We can love nature and still hate the tyranny of their rules. But we do need some rules. When I was a kid, the air around here was filthy. We didn't open windows because soot would come in. It's good that government passed air pollution rules. Industry put scrubbers in smokestacks and catalytic converters on cars. The air got cleaner. It's also great that we have towns now have sewage treatment plants. Today, the rivers around Manhattan are clean enough that people can swim in them.
Even here, within sight of the Empire State Building, within a short distance of millions of people flushing, I'm willing to do this. They do sometimes find dead bodies in the river, but the water is clean enough to swim in. So 3 cheers for anti-pollution regulations. But carbon dioxide is not pollution. Environmental zealots confuse people by comparing greenhouse gas to smog and soot, but they are very different. Carbon dioxide may not turn out to be a problem at all. The world has real problems: malaria, malnutrition, desperate poverty. Our country's deep in debt, and fewer jobs get created because we have too many rules. We don't need more micromanagement from the EPA. We need less. Let's chill out about global warming. Then free people will create a better world. That's our show. See you next week.